Good to have you here. This is OmniView, episode 38, Balanced News Perspectives. Today is April 27th, 2026, starting the week with a clear-eyed look at the stories that matter. King Charles begins U.S. state visit amid heightened security fears following the White House Correspondents Dinner shooting. Gunfire interrupted the annual White House Correspondents Dinner on Saturday night at the Washington Hilton. President Trump and the First Lady were evacuated unharmed while journalists sheltered under tables. The suspect, a 31-year-old man from Southern California named Cole Thomas Allen, is in custody. A manifesto attributed to him mocked security lapses and used strong language against Trump. The Daily Mail reports that the manifesto detailed how easily the shooter reached the event. It claimed even an Iranian agent could have brought heavy weaponry, framing the incident as a stark failure of protection for high-profile gatherings. The Guardian highlights renewed scrutiny of White House security arrangements. It places the event in the broader context of political violence, returning to the spotlight in the United States. Conservative-leaning coverage tends to emphasize immediate security breakdowns and the shooter's direct criticisms of Trump. Other voices connect the shooting to wider questions about how political rhetoric and public events intersect with threats of violence. They stress the need for calm assessment rather than partisan point scoring. One angle that stands out is how quickly interpretations diverged based on existing political lenses. What specific security protocols were in place at the Washington Hilton that night, and how does the manifesto's content align or conflict with initial statements from officials? Shifting focus to international diplomacy, King Charles and Queen Camilla have arrived in Washington to begin a 4-day state visit. The trip proceeds despite security concerns heightened by the recent shooting at the Washington Hilton. President Trump had been hosting an event when a gunman attempted to storm it shortly before the royal arrival. Mail online coverage frames the visit as continuing under a cloud of security fears linked to the recent attack. The decision to proceed underscores the importance both the United Kingdom and the United States place on maintaining diplomatic traditions even amid threats. British outlets tend to emphasize the symbolic value of the monarchy, strengthening ties with the U.S. at a turbulent time. They also note practical security enhancements that will likely be in place. Some commentary highlights the timing as particularly sensitive, given recent tensions involving the U.S., Iran, and broader global instability. The interplay between security threats and long-standing diplomatic rituals raises an important point. How have recent security incidents influenced diplomatic scheduling, and what historical role have royal state visits played in UK-US relations? In British politics, Labour MPs are preparing to call on Keir Starmer to announce his departure timeline. This follows anticipated difficult results in the May local elections. Informal proposals for an orderly transition are circulating across party factions. Discussions have reportedly shifted from whether the Prime Minister should leave to how and when that might occur. The Daily Mail presents these moves as evidence of growing pressure on a beleaguered Starmer. Rebels are expected to push for him to step down by the Autumn Party Conference. The Guardian reports that figures from rival Labour factions are now focusing on transition mechanics. This suggests a broader recognition of electoral challenges after 27 years of dominance in places like Wales. One side highlights internal party conflict and perceived weakness. The other frames it as pragmatic discussion about the party's future direction. The tension here revolves around accountability to voters versus stability of leadership during turbulent times. What specific local election results would trigger stronger calls for change, and how might the timing of any departure affect Labour's policy agenda? Turning to the Middle East, planned U.S.-Iran negotiations in Pakistan were canceled. President Trump announced the decision. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has traveled to Russia for talks as diplomatic efforts between Washington and Tehran remain on hold. Oil prices have risen in response to the deadlock. CNBC and BBC News report the stalling of talks and the subsequent increase in oil prices. They focus on market implications and the cancellation of the Pakistan meeting. Deutsche Welle notes Araghchi's continued diplomatic efforts in Russia amid the war with his country. Business outlets connect the diplomatic impasse directly to energy market movements. Diplomatic-focused reporting highlights the broader geopolitical maneuvering involving multiple powers. Both sides agree talks have not progressed, but they differ on whether this represents a temporary pause or a more serious breakdown. Russia's involvement adds another layer to an already complex situation. How might Russia's role influence the trajectory of these talks, and how do oil market reactions reflect broader geopolitical risk assessments? In Australia, former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull has criticized the Liberal Party's decision to preference one nation in the Farrer by-election. He described it as a retrograde move. The comment came during ongoing news coverage that also included reports of a house fire in the Blue Mountains. 2 missing people there are believed to be children. There were also reactions to Anzac Day events. The Guardian's live blog presents Turnbull's remarks as a notable intervention from a prominent Liberal. It frames the preference deal as controversial within the party's broader traditions. Coverage captures emotional responses to the Blue Mountains fire and criticism of attempts to politicize Anzac Day commemorations. Turnbull's stance appears rooted in concerns about the direction of conservative politics in Australia. It also touches on the implications of aligning with one nation. These stories reveal overlapping themes of political standards, community safety, and appropriate respect for national remembrance. What is the historical relationship between the Liberal Party and One Nation, and how might this debate influence voter perceptions ahead of future elections? Now, to really understand much of the coverage around these security, diplomatic, and political stories, there is something most reporting leaves out. The way different outlets choose which details to highlight often reveals more about their audience expectations than about the events themselves. For instance, when a manifesto exists, some sources quote it extensively, while others emphasize official caution about motives. When diplomatic visits proceed despite threats, one perspective stresses resolve and tradition, while another stresses risk and timing. The mechanism is simple. Facts are rarely invented, but the frame around them shapes what listeners notice first. Security lapses can be presented as policy failure or as isolated incidents depending on the lens. Political pressure on a leader can read as accountability or as disloyalty. Next time you hear sharply different descriptions of the same incident, ask yourself which details each source chose to lead with and which they placed lower or omitted entirely. That choice often tells you more about the interpretive frame than the raw events do. In Japan, bears emerging from hibernation are being cited at a faster pace than in 2025. That year was already a record for attacks. A woman's body was found in Iwate Prefecture last week. A police officer was recently injured in a separate bear encounter. Authorities are urging caution as people prepare for the Golden Week holidays. The Guardian reports these incidents as evidence of increasing human-bear contact in northern urban and rural areas. Coverage highlights both the animals' post-hibernation hunger and the risks to residents and visitors. Officials emphasize practical precautions rather than alarmism. This story connects to broader questions about how environmental changes and human development affect wildlife habitats and behavior in Japan. The balance between respecting wildlife patterns and protecting public safety offers a useful case study. What factors might explain the increase in bear sightings this year, and how does this compare to wildlife management challenges in other countries? A Taiwan court has handed down jail terms in a trade secrets theft case involving TSMC. A former Tokyo Electron employee received a 10-year sentence. 4 other defendants received terms ranging from 10 months to 6 years. Al Jazeera reports the sentences as a significant development in protecting intellectual property within the semiconductor industry. The case highlights the high stakes involved in technology competition between major Asian economies. Coverage tends to underscore the importance of robust legal frameworks for innovation-driven industries. It notes the severity of the penalties as a deterrent. Different stakeholders view these cases through lenses of national economic security, corporate competitiveness, and the challenges of preventing industrial espionage. Given TSMC's central place in global supply chains, the ruling carries weight beyond Taiwan. How significant is TSMC to the global semiconductor supply chain, and how might these sentences affect future industry hiring and collaboration practices? Central banks, including the Federal Reserve, Bank of Japan, and Bank of Canada, are expected to maintain their current interest rates this week. Policymakers are monitoring economic effects from the Iran conflict. The Bank of England and European Central Bank are also likely to hold rates with similar cautious messaging. Bloomberg's analysis focuses on the hawkish stance central banks are taking due to geopolitical uncertainty from the Iran situation. Coverage examines how global events influence monetary policy decisions. Different economic schools of thought may emphasize varying risks, inflation versus growth. They agree that central bank independence requires careful assessment of data rather than political pressure. This coordinated caution illustrates how distant conflicts can shape domestic financial conditions. What specific economic indicators are central banks watching most closely, and how has geopolitical risk historically affected monetary policy? Before we go, tomorrow watch for further developments in the US-Iran diplomatic channel and any early indications from local elections in Britain. That's OmniView. For full source links and more context, check out today's written briefing on the OmniView summaries page. As always, compare outlets, look for primary documents, and separate what's known from what's assumed. If balanced perspectives are valuable to you, share this with a friend and subscribe wherever you listen. See you tomorrow. This podcast is curated by Patrick, but generated using AI voice synthesis of my voice using ElevenLabs. The primary reason to do this is I unfortunately don't have the time to be consistent with generating all the content and wanted to focus on creating consistent and regular episodes for all the themes that I enjoy, and I hope others do as well.
Without taking the dive, we went on vacation. We had a nice time. My doomsday